Hello and welcome to How Would You Rate Your Pain? We will be exploring life, loss, love, and the power of resilience. I am Dr. Tiffany Bartell. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to go on this journey with you. Hello and welcome to another episode of How Would You Rate Your Pain, the podcast that explores life, loss, love, and the power of resilience. I'm Dr. Tiffany Bartell, your host, and today I have my friend Liam with me.
Hello. I am so glad to be here, Dr. Bartell.
You can just call me Tiffany.
I will always give credit where credit is due, doctor.
Oh my goodness. So Liam, you brought something.
I did bring something. My mom always told me never go anywhere without a glass of wine.
Goodness.
So I brought a glass of wine because, as we're about to talk about, this is what I do. This is who I am, and so we're gonna bring a little bit of me into this podcast.
You have glasses?
Of course, I have glasses.
You have everything.
Of course. So bring a little bit of myself into your podcast as well.
I love it. What did you bring for us today?
So I also do this on my podcast as well. So I do a little wine recommendation and read the label. So I brought Slow Press Cabernet, which is my new favorite wine or Cabernet that I've been drinking as of recently. But it has like really nice like oak, like tones to it. Nothing really too strong because I'm not a huge oak drinker, but it's crafted and sits in oak for about I think a couple of months or so. And so I have been really into this one as of recently. So
I am very excited.
Yes.
You are the perfect guest. I thought I was pretty fancy bringing cookies to the studio, but you come bearing wine.
I always do.
This is amazing. Thank you so much. That's so kind of you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers, friend. I'm so happy. Ooh, that's
perfect.
Yummy. It's perfect. It's not too sweet, and it's quite lovely too. All right. Now I have to remember what we were going to talk about today.
Derailed the entire conversation.
So maybe we should start off with telling a little bit about how we know each other.
Yes.
So we know each other from Chattanooga, which is the network that we're both a part of. Mm-hmm. How long have you been podcasting?
Yeah, so I've been the host of Crime Over Wine for a little more than a year now. It started as like this, like little like bolt of genius,
like
as I say.
Not?
Right.
It is a bolt of genius. Yes.
About a year and a half ago. And I've been podcasting pretty much ever since. I met Michael about 6 months ago. And so I've been a member of the Chattanooga network for about 6 months, and it's been fantastic. I'm so glad you're on board now as well. But I've been a lover of crime and wine ever since ever since I was little.
The beginning of time.
Since the beginning of the time, of course.
You were born.
Since I was born. And so it's always just been kind of in my DNA. And so Crime Over Wine, we tell true crime stories, like your favorite true crime podcast every week. But we add a layer of an extra layer to it, which is a wine recommendation, because I always say that everything tastes a little bit better with a glass of wine in hand. So
It does. So I remember you telling me the first time we met, which was when you were doing an event for the podcasters on the art of storytelling, which you do so magically. And I remember you saying that, you were thinking about what you like to do at the end of a day.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I want to listen to true crime and I want to have a glass of wine. And so I love that you're able to like replicate that for everyone else. And I think there's a lot of people who enjoy a glass of wine, but don't feel like they're educated enough to like talk about it or even choose. It's really daunting. So I love how you give everybody like a little bit of, street cred. When it comes to their wine.
Well, and I think wine is one of those things that everyone should be able to enjoy if they want to, right? I mean, everyone should have that comfort thing, and wine happens to be wine, right? It's just something that I really enjoy. But it can be so daunting, right? Like I have friends all the time that I'm like, oh, would you like a glass of wine? And they're like, I don't know anything about wine. And I'm like, well, the good thing is you don't have to know anything about it to taste it and like it, right? And so, but it can be a lot, right? It can be a lot of, the tannins and all these like big terms that no one really seems to know what it even is. Dryness, sweetness, red, Cabernet, what are all these words? Oak, right? Yeah. And so, but it's just one of those things that like everyone should be able to have access to. And so I like to try to make it a little bit more accessible, talk it down a little bit more. Don't get into the weeds of all the things. Just try to, get it down to, the, average wine drinker, average, consumer, where they are, as opposed to like using these big words that a lot of podcasts use, which there's a place for it. Don't get me wrong. I listen to those and I love those podcasts. But not everyone has to. I'm a wine drinker for the people. That's right. There you go, Tiffany.
For the greater good. Right. I love it so much.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about like, how did you get into true crime? Because like it sounds like from the little bit we've talked about before, there's like been kind of a progression of your involvement with it. Yeah. So tell us like what sparked your interest. You've been loving crime and wine since birth.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much out of the womb. So I always say, crime over wine is an homage to the lifestyle that I lived when I was growing up. My mom, is a huge, first of all, listener of the podcast, and second of all, huge wine lover, and is very much so into true crime as well. And so I remember growing up watching the ID channel, watching Oxygen, like watching all those documentaries, and just really being entrenched in it. SVU, everyone's gateway true crime. And so it was when I came up with the idea, it just felt right. It just felt like these were my people. These were, who I felt most comfortable with, felt, do what I
family.
Felt like family. Right. It's what I felt comfortable doing. And so it's very much so an homage to the foundation upon which I was raised. Not just with crime and wine, but also with the, ethics I put into it and all that. And so I was, when I, before I became what I do right now for a living, I was a crime reporter in town in Chattanooga for about 2 years. A year before that, I was in North Carolina, and did all of that work through college and well into my career. And one of the reasons why I wanted to be a reporter was to advocate for people. There are so many people in this world who don't have their own platform, who don't have their own voice, who have a voice but don't know how to use it. And so here I am, who just happened to luckily find myself on TV or find myself with a microphone in front of my face, and have an opportunity to why not use that as an opportunity to help other people be able to share their experience and their lives. I always said as a reporter, whenever I was talking to somebody, it was usually the best day of their lives or the worst day of their lives, and I saw a lot of the worst of people's lives as a reporter, quite literally as it was playing out. And so to be able to share that and to be able to be a small part of that larger story, and to be able to share that in 2 minutes or in 45 minutes is a blessing and an honor. And I don't take that lightly, right? I think that it's really important.
It's a privilege.
It's absolutely is a privilege, right? And as a podcaster yourself, right? Like I think you can understand the delicateness that you have when you have someone's story and you want to do it right, you want to do it perfect, and you want to make sure you get all the details right and get that right moment and to share it with that in a way that they'd feel proud of. And that's what I think about, right? I think about that all the time on Crime Over Wine. I thought about it as a reporter. Absolutely. Shows. Yeah. Because otherwise, what are we doing, right? Like otherwise, what are we doing if we're not proud of what we end up putting out at the end of the day?
Well, because I think that like it's so easy to make it scintillating, and I think that we struggle as a society with like being fascinated by the pain and suffering of other people because it's like juicy tea or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm thinking about right now, this isn't a crime, but I was just thinking about Kate Middleton, and her taking time off for her health, and just how wild it got, through social media and even news organizations, just and then to find out there's a lot of people who I think felt a little ashamed to be like, oh, she's battling cancer. Maybe we should not make jokes.
Right. Well, and what a perfect example of like, you never know what someone's going through. Right. And so I think that that's a really good example of like, approaching everyone with kindness. Right. Because you never know what's going on like really deep down. And as I'm sure that way better than I do.
Right? I don't know. I think we both have sat with equally difficult stories. So as listeners know, I'm a trauma therapist, and you have had a front row seat to so many traumatic, difficult events. What was it like being so young and just stepping into those situations? Because I can't imagine, what the first story that you covered or the first time, I mean, you grew up with it, but it's really different than seeing it and like reporting on it yourself. What was that like?
Yeah. And, I'll tell you the first time that I really realized, how real it is. I knew it was real before, but how very real it was a case that I covered as a reporter, and I just saw so much of myself in that young woman who I was talking about. And it was so easy for me to be like, that so easily could have been me. That so easily, if I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or made this choice instead of this choice, that really neither of those two choices were good or bad. They just were different. That I easily could have ended up in that situation. That stuck with me. That still stuck with me. That was about 3 years ago that happened.
So it's that like empathy versus I think our natural tendency is to do that psychological distancing of like, what did they do to put themselves in that situation? How is it their fault? Because if it's their fault, then it won't happen to me.
Right.
So I think it's really fascinating that you leaned in and like identified with that like common humanity instead of like pushing it away. You stepped into it.
Yeah, and that's interesting because the event that you were talking about, I believe it was Megan McLean who asked me this really interesting question that I have never really thought about and have not stopped thinking about ever since, ironically. But, it was, asking that she asked me, what do I do when I'm talking about someone who is, up to, is putting themselves into precarious situations, in participating in bad behavior or in, sociologically bad behavior, right? From a society standpoint. And I said to her, I was like, I always try to think about how that person could have ended up in that situation to begin with, right? And so we think about like the most vulnerable people in our community, in our society,
all the marginalized populations.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, sex workers, homeless individuals. It's all those people who, when they were 5 years old, they were no different than we were at 5 years old, presumably. And they made a decision, made a choice that we very easily could have made, or maybe we didn't even have that option to make, right? Because of our upbringing. And maybe conversely, maybe they didn't have the option to make the decisions that we made. And so I always try to think about it like that. And whenever I do those stories about, sex workers or whatever it may be, I always try to try to find what put them into that situation to begin with.
The real culprit. Which is the tragedy, not the person.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. And humanize them because they're people. And I think that's absolutely the baseline, right, of what we all can relate to, is we're all human beings.
I really like that because I think that, yes, your show is entertaining and fun, but it also kind of makes you think. And I feel like so Liam knows that I have like a low threshold for scary things. I'm like, it has to be, you have to find the body. The person has to be in jail. Right. It has to be over. It can't be going on. So that limits my true crime consumption.
I can see that.
I'm a real bummer to watch a movie with. I'm a gasper, a little bit of a screamer. I wore my pearls just in case you say something so I can like clutch my pearls today.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, I think that, I think our sensitivities are different, to different things. But, there's so much depicted by Hollywood that I just think is criminal. I think there's things that like, violent crimes and things like that. I just don't understand how we can like make that into entertainment and make the society better. But that's probably for another
different podcast.
Yeah, different podcast, different day.
I think there's something to be said about the shock value that it feels unnecessary, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, there's some gruesomeness that, especially if it is related to a true thing or whatever. So what was it like being a true crime reporter and like, how did you cope with that? Just to like have that be your profession. It's like you're actively looking for bad things that have happened and then making sure people know about it. So there's the advocacy part of it that seems like it would be really empowering, but then there's the tragedy of it, which seems like it would be heavy. Like, how is that?
And I would always try to balance it out, like for my own mental health, right? Like always try to balance it out. Like I wasn't just every day talking about people who were died or whatever. I was also, trying to find like positive stories in people's lives as well. I have to do that, right?
I like that. I
listen, as soon as I finish recording my episodes about, these days about, whatever person was murdered of the week, I always go back and I watch, my Real Housewives of New Jersey, just to like balance everything out in life because
cleanse your palate.
Cleanse your palate. You got to, right?
Yeah.
And so, it weighs on you, right? I mean, it like it would anybody else. I think that there's, something to be said though, too. And this is to a certain extent why I don't do it anymore is like, you do get a little desensitized to like what you're talking about because it's just, make the deadline. And it's just, it can be a lot to have to, to be dealing with very vulnerable people in very precarious situations. And then, to then have to, in the back of your mind, be worrying about, okay, great, but like I have to make my 1 o'clock or like I have to, you know what I mean? And it's just, it can be, you can feel a little robotic. And I was certainly feeling very robotic. And so that was one of the reasons why I stopped doing it, frankly. And, but as soon as I stopped, of course, I got the itch again. And so that's when I started the podcast because I, again, like I said, I can't stand having information and not being able to tell everyone about it. I mean, in every aspect of the word, to be clear. Right. And so I have to have, once I learn about something, I have to tell absolutely every single person that I know about that thing. And so the best way to do that, of course, is to start a podcast. And so that's what I did. But to that point too, there were so many people out there that I noticed true crime podcasts that were frankly not doing it right. Like they were doing it with lack of sensitivity. They were, getting facts wrong, getting information wrong, skewing things.
And that can be kind of re-traumatizing for the families, right?
Absolutely.
Like that just feels like it would be so difficult and feel so unjust.
Yeah. Oh, and families have told me that before, that really? Like that it absolutely is re-traumatizing to have to have that come up. Because think about that, like the last thing that because like again, for people who don't know, like I work for in city communications now. And so like people like in organizations, like come, I see it all the time with media, like approaching people about like facts that are wrong on that perspective. But like I get to go home and like, do whatever I want to. Think about, as a victim's family member, having to have that, but then also having to like fight for the correct information. Like, no. She didn't go to this high school. She went to this high school. You shouldn't have to do that. Right. Like it should just be, you should be able to grieve in peace and you should be able to grieve, have the time to grieve. And, because that's so critical, right? I mean, everyone needs time to like process what the emotions that they're feeling, especially after a traumatic situation, right? And so that wasn't fair to me to see that and to see it play out and to not be able to do something about it was not an option. And so that's why I did what I did and started the podcast.
I love it. And I think that like it's an act of advocacy to both create this kind of podcast, but also to choose what you listen to. Like you're voting for this. And, I don't always succeed, but one thing I try to do for myself is I don't click on any article that has like a paparazzi taken picture of a celebrity because it feels very invasive and unfair. And because I think every time we click, we vote.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so,
well, that's what they thrive off of.
Right, it's the data analytics that like this is what the people want.
Yeah,
and I respect the fact everyone's trying to make a living to some extent. But I think, for listeners, if you love true crime, you can listen to Liam's podcast with a guilt-free conscience because it's accurate, it's respectful, it's empathetic. So do you have any favorite like stories that you deep dived on that you like found out something like that was really hard hitting, or what's like your hallmark of like this was so many twists and turns? And
Oh man, that's a good one. You know, right now I'm really obsessed with Johnny Ghosh, which the episodes are coming out as we're recording this episode.
Okay. Is that the one that I saw the post on?
Yeah, so that one just came out last week. I've been like reading about that for the past month, and so I have to, like, I mean, there's just so many twists, turns, like lefts, rights. One that like really stuck with me in terms of a crime though was this young girl, and she's from my hometown in New York. Okay. And so her name is Josette Wright, and I will take any opportunity to talk about Josette Wright. But her murder is on paper unsolved. They arrested 2 young men for it, but then just very recently, as of last year, both of their convictions were overturned. Oh, wow. And so now no one's serving time, you know, and again, there's a hot debate as to whether or not they did it or not, frankly. But
do you have
in my town, you know, I go back and forth, Tiffany, you know, because I think there's so much pointing. And again, go listen to the episode, frankly, because we could talk about it. Is it one I can
listen to?
Oh, absolutely. It's out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes. I think you'd be fine with it. I think you'd be okay with it. But there's so much there, but also so many question marks around the same thing. And so I really go back and forth, frankly. But I go back to, and again, going back to what we were talking about before about, like, you know, vulnerable people and, like, you know, how did people end up in these situations that they end up in? Yeah. You know, there's this young girl, she's a teenager, you know, again, not unlike anything that you and I didn't experience back when we were 15.
Just telling Liam and producer Trey before we started that I accidentally dated a drug dealer for like 6 months when I was in high school. I didn't find out till years later that he was like very, like,
please tell
prolific.
Me there's an episode about this that I can hear. I would listen to this over and over and over again.
But all that to say, like, how many of us, when we think about our lives, I tend to be, I'm pretty stupid about my own stuff, and I'm not really situationally aware, which I probably shouldn't say, like, publicly. But my husband gives me, like, multiple things of pepper spray wherever I go. And there's a lot of people concerned for my safety. Yeah. But the point is that, like, none of us are invincible. And sometimes it's just by chance that any of us make it out of adolescence.
Right. No,
like,
that's so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Josette Wright was certainly one of these, you know, young people who, you know, was very much so that, I'll put it that way. But yeah, I mean, it just to that point, right? Like, it was just somebody who, like, everyone can see themselves in, and at that age, you know, rebellious teenager, and ended up dying. And so and there was just a lot of questions around how it happened or who, and it was a lot. And so I think about that a lot, because one of my, and again, you could probably psychoanalyze me over this, Tiffany, but but there's something like really deep down in me that just like really fears like being forgotten, right? And so there's something to be said, I think, about, like, you know, like what happens after you die, and like you die in such a horrible way, and suddenly it's not just about who you were, what life you lived, or who you could have been. It's about how it happened, who did it, you know, the drama around it for decades.
Wow. And
that to me is just so, like, there's just nothing worse, in my opinion, than going that way. Because it's like, if you die, your life deserves to be celebrated. You know, my journalism professor used to tell me, when someone dies, it's not about how they died, it's about how they lived. And I want people to remember me for how I lived. I don't want people to remember me for the horrible circumstances around which I died. Yeah. And so I think about that a lot. You know, it's when I'm talking about these different cases, is just making sure that their memories live on beyond them. Because again, people say, you know, you only die when people stop talking about you. And so I don't want that to ever happen either. So yeah,
I think that's such a service that you give, you know, because I think that a life cut short, it's just so difficult that grieving is so stunted. And for the clients I've had who've endured that in their families, you know, there's so much like trauma associated with how they passed, or the uncertainty of not knowing what actually happened. Right. And, you know, blank spaces are so painful for people. And so I think, you know, I always say that like pain and suffering need a witness, you know. I think that's why we have thousands upon thousands of memoirs of like the Holocaust and all these different things, is because, you know, they deserve to have their story heard and have a witness to their pain and suffering.
Yeah. Well, I believe everyone does, right? Like, regardless of,
big or
the
smaller.
worst.
Yeah.
Absolutely, in my opinion, right? Yeah. And we were just talking before about like how everyone needs, that support, right? Like everyone, regardless, even if you're the most independent person on earth, you need someone to watch your dog after every once in a while. You know what I mean? Everyone needs that little bit of support. And I think that, if I can do that from hundreds of miles away, I'm going to do that.
I love that. Yeah. So what's your kind of progression on like, how do you choose your stories and like what's your process for, as much as you want to disclose, if it's like a secret recipe or it's magic, then feel free to hold back. But, what's your process of like picking and then like moving through the research process? Yeah. Because your research process is pretty in-depth.
Oh, very in-depth. Yeah. I make sure there's no stone unturned. I'd rather leave out a detail that I don't think adds to something than, not know about it in the back end. I always, I have a Rolodex. You can decide figuratively or literally if my Rolodex exists on cases, but
I'm coming over and I'm looking for a Rolodex.
Excellent. And so I just have that, kind of in my back pocket of just cases that I've heard about, read about. And then once I start, I'm an obsessive person this way. And so once I start reading about something, I can't stop. I deep dive. Yeah. Right. And so that's when I know that that's my next case, right? Is that like when I just can't stop thinking about something, reading about something, and I just need to talk to someone about it. That's when I know that the next case is coming. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And then I have to do a show about it. Right. And meet Tiffany. Yes. And so that's where it starts, is when I just know that if I get excited about something, like think about like how when someone who's just like so excited about or like so into something, you get into it too, even if you really
catchy.
Even if you just really couldn't really care less or you know what I mean in reality, but because you care about it, I care about it so much. And so I feel the same way about cases, is that once I start obsessing over something, I have to tell someone about it. I just have to get it out. I get into it and I have to tell you why it's so crazy. And
that's
important.
Contagious.
It is contagious.
Because I've listened to you talk live and on recording, and I can tell that like you can't wait to tell the next turn or twist or something. Yeah.
Oh, I get really excited about a cliffhanger. Absolutely.
I don't know if you could hear me gasping at your live event at Amada's.
Yes, the answer is yes.
I did not have my pearls. I could not clutch. I relied only on my audible breathing. I may or may not have grabbed my friends. That one had a twist. Which episode is that?
That one's episode 60. That one just came out 2 weeks ago as of the recording of this episode.
So when you're listening to episode 60, I was
there. If you hear someone gasping in the background, that's Tiffany.
I did not scream, which I was really proud of. So that's kind of your process. Like, how do you close a story, or do you ever close a story?
Oh, good question. I think there's something to be said about like a really about letting things lie, right? Like I think that once things are tied up in a nice bow, like think about like that perfect show, right? That is just, like I think about This Is Us, right? Which I think is like the best show on TV.
I've never watched it because I was afraid it would make me cry.
It will, but you need to watch it anyways, Tiffany.
Can we watch it together?
Oh, we definitely can. But
because I might need some like moral support.
Oh, absolutely. I will watch that show over and over and over again. But like, like when that was over, it was just ended so perfectly. And so like, I like to think about, cases that just shouldn't be touched again, because it's like it's it's good, we're okay, we feel good about where we are right now, let's not like poke the bear any more than we have to. But then there are a lot of cases, and these are my favorite cases personally, where there is an open-ended to it, because we just don't know, but we need to know, right? Like there are these cases where no one's been arrested, no one's been found, and
those are the ones that I really struggle with.
Yeah, like, it breaks your well. And going back to what I was talking about before about about fear of being forgotten, right? Like if I die in this way, or like go missing in this way, and nobody finds out how,
I will find out.
Thank you, Tiffany. But
yes.
But you know what I mean, though. Like there's no
unimaginable.
There's no way to describe that kind of pain for beyond, right? Because how do you rest after that? Again, going back to whatever happens afterwards. How do you how's your soul at peace? Like
with this floating out
there. Right. And so that's why I think it's so important to talk about those cases specifically. People get on me all the time about, we want more solved cases. We don't want unsolved cases. We need finality. And okay, I get that to a certain extent. We want that for a listener.
But the families and the victim deserves.
And if one other person, hears about this and may have information, or at the very least can spread it to people who may have information, I'm going to do that.
Have you ever had a situation as a reporter, or with the work that you do now, where someone has called in a tip, or I mean, I guess you wouldn't always know because you're referring them to another agency. And
so
it's hard to know.
As a reporter, there were a couple times where people would reach out to me with information they thought was pertinent. I usually just pass it right along to the police agency, and if they find that important, then they'll tell us, right? And so that's how I look at that. But not so much as I've had a lot of people who've reached out to me about really passionate or about cases that they feel really passionately about, which I always look at those.
So
if
it's a trickle down effect. I love it.
Well, and again, going back to if somebody else is so into it, then I'm so into it. And so I always try to make sure that to cover those cases because
it's important to them.
It's so important to them, right? Yeah. And if they cared enough to write out that 2-second message or whatever it is, then I should care enough to read about it a little bit and do an episode on it. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, I think the day that we find someone's tragedy boring or uninteresting, that's kind of a dark day, right? So it's really interesting because, we both do so much with trauma and, these horrific situations. And I'm only hearing from the people, whether it's a live, survivor or the family. And I don't really hear the factual account. I just get their perspective on it. And so it's really interesting because I find that when I listen to true crime, I can be easily swayed. And I don't know if it's the therapist in me, but if you're telling me this person probably did, I'm like, all right. Cool. I'm not a good jury member. Don't call me. Very easily persuaded because I think my job is to just adopt the perspective. So what helps you kind of keep an open mind? Because the episodes that I've listened to, you've told me some, don't listen to them because
that's fair.
I won't sleep anymore.
Usually I'm I need to start warning Tiffany before they go out. Listen, you may want to skip this week.
I mean, I can't be cremated now, so that's a problem.
That's very fair.
And then I also can't be donated to science. Because I know about that. I know too much now.
I feel like I've contributed substantially to your life through this, just for the record.
You really have. I'm probably safer, and whatever my end of life ends up being, it's probably a little bit more secure, and because of you. So my family thanks you. Yeah.
I feel good about that.
My future self thanks you. I should probably listen to more of them, and it would help me maybe stay alive longer too.
Yeah. Well, I think we all can learn some survival skills from true crime for sure. I think some of us, the survival skills just never leave the house, which is fine, right?
Okay. That's okay. Yeah. I took self-defense in college, and I had unfortunately been attacked. It's a long story too, but I just felt like I wanted to have some agency. And so I took this self-defense class in college, and half of the class was lecture and case studies, basically to teach you not to be in unsafe situations.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for women, don't go grocery shopping at night. And if you have a child with you, put the child in the car, lock the car before you put the groceries in the trunk.
Interesting.
And just all these things that I didn't know before. And then the last half was getting thrown around the mat.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
My final.
Not to brag.
The final was you walk down a hallway and you don't know where the attacker is, and they're suited up with the big suit and the helmet and everything, and your classmates and your professor are at either side of the hallway. And he just jumps out of a hallway and attacks you, and you have to defend yourself.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah,
and you aced
so
it.
much. And I aced it. They took pictures. I looked like an animal, but it's okay.
That sounds terrifying for me, but I'm so glad for you.
I actually have a little bit of residual adrenaline right now.
Good.
But back to my question, because I got way off track, but it's okay. So how do you keep like an open mind, you know, or like what persuades you, or, you know, because you just seem to do such a great job of having like a balanced approach.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I always try, again, that's the reporter in me. I always try to, you know, relay both sets of facts or, you know, multiple sets of facts, whatever it may be. And I do try to, and that's kind of, I guess, where, you know, because as a reporter I wasn't allowed to, right, like, you know, give you my opinion on like that, on that situation, and so I would just kind of like, you know, here's all the information that you can have, like make up your own mind. At least I like to think so. I know that's not what all reporters do, just to be clear.
It's true.
But from you know, as a podcaster, you know, I think it gave me a little bit more freedom to be able to do things that, you know, I wasn't really allowed to do as a reporter, or like, you know, kind of, you know, first of all, tell longer form stories, right? Because as a reporter, you have 3 minutes to get your point across.
Short. I don't know how you guys do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was always known to be like
3 weeks of like research and then.
Right. Yeah. I was always known to be like the guy who, you know, went well over his time, just to be clear.
You wanted to do a good job.
I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to get all the information in there.
Be ethical.
Right. But now I get 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes more. This, you know, the episode that I just dropped was going to be 2 hours long, and I had to kind of chop it down in half and do a 2-parter. But, you know, I can have a little bit more flexibility around, you know, what I do, like, you know, what I talk about, how I talk about it as well. And so I like to, you know, kind of lay out all the information as best as I can, so that way you can still make up your own decision, but still, like, you know, because of my expertise and my background and my knowledge on the case, I still like to, you know,
influence a little,
commentate a little bit, right? Because like, I think that there's that's
what makes it interesting. Nobody wants like the, you know, the abstract. They want like personalized.
Exactly. And I
want a guided tour.
Well, I
want your opinion.
Right. Yeah. I think so. I think that's what a lot of people want, because I think that, you know, people want to make sense of the situation. And again, I always talk about, you know, people who say, oh, you know, the news needs to just be like facts and you know, just tell me, you know, fact, which sure, I think there's a element to that 100%. But then they go and patronize the CNNs and the Fox Newses and the MSNBCs of the world, and which is
you're getting
all but slanted
a
facts.
Perspective.
Absolutely.
For sure. It's not objective.
Right, exactly. And so it's just, it's funny to me to think that way, because certainly if you wanted, you know, just your, you know, objective facts and information just back to back, local news wouldn't be in the state that it's in. But so anyways, but that's a different soapbox, different podcast for today.
There's so much space for it.
So much space for it.
You vote by your consummation.
That is correct.
Or consuming of,
sure.
you know,
media.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's that.
Sure.
Yeah. So you kind of have that freedom to like delve a little bit into your personal thoughts and opinions and things like that. So like, what would you hope that your podcast accomplishes in the world?
Well, that's a good question, because, you know, when I started the podcast, I'm sure I've talked to you about this. I'd be happy to, you know, if a couple more people, you know, other than my mom listened, and now I get more 2,000 listeners a week.
Wow.
And so that is
something.
It's been good. And so I am, you know, so that's a it's significantly huge. More than what I was expecting to get. And so that I'm happy there, right? To be able to do that. But so with that being said, I think that my only goal out of doing it, or the way that'd be happier or happiest of doing this podcast is if just one extra person knows about this person, right? Like knows about this case, you know, can tell all their friends about this case. Because at the end of the day, again, like I said at the beginning of the episode, where, you know, my only, you know, interest is to have a platform so I can lend it out to other people every week. And if I can do that and do it successfully, and, you know, have one extra person, even if I'm not like the next like Ashley Flowers of the world, which I don't intend to be or think I am or could be. But, you know, I can be, you know, somebody who just has another option for you to listen to, another case, and to have another story, and you know, and have that victim's family, you know, feel like their you know, their loved one is being heard, their loved one's story is being, you know, shared, you know, and be able to do my part in that. That's my main interest. and doing the podcast, because a lot of people do it because it's gory and it's fun and they have fun with it and they laugh and blah blah blah. Nothing about what I do is funny to me, right? Like everything that I do is serious, and there's a certain element of an insane detail pops up every once in a while and I'm like, that's ridiculous and I have to talk about that. You can't ignore the elephant in the room.
The crematorium one. What episode is that?
Oh gosh, I can't even tell you. It was somewhere. It's the Walker County cremator case.
Walker County.
Yeah, Ray Marsh. It happened right down the street from where we're sitting.
Funny. Yeah, but there were several times that I like did a little gasp chuckle because it was like, no way, like for real, not. Yeah, like
right. Well, and I think there's like certain element of like okay, this is so ridiculous that we have to just talk about it and laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that to a certain extent, probably the people who were involved at this in that case probably at this point can kind of giggle at like the the absurdity of what they lived through.
It's the absurdity. It's not what happened.
Right.
But there still was respect.
Yeah, and there are like a lot of people who do these cases that of murder and sexual assault and all this gore stuff and are giggling about it and laughing at. There was this one case that I am also obsessed with where his name is Herb Baumeister, if I remember correctly. He's a serial killer. Oh. And one of the things that he used to do was he would lure men into his home and as a date or whatever, as a hookup. And part of this experience was going out to the backyard and hanging out by the pool. And when they went out to the backyard, there were mannequins everywhere, as he was having like a party.
I just had like a rush of terror.
Oh, right. No, insane.
Like, right? That's the moment that you're like, ugh.
That would be when I would leave, certainly. Right. But again, a lot of people didn't. And so there were, there are a lot of podcasts out there. And there was there's a true crime comedy podcast. I will never play that.
That sounds so difficult.
That is such an oxymoron. You can't.
It's lives.
You can't. It's lives that we're talking about. And I think again, going back to like what we talk about on your podcast, Tiffany. It's like it's the psychology of the human brain. I feel like needs to make sense of this, and the only way you can really make sense of this is to laugh about it. I feel like to a certain extent. So there's that much, but there's also a way to do it with humility and with respect of what we're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. So
I think as a parent, I've sat with so many parents that have had something tragic happen to their children, and your world stops. And a lot of what they always tell me is like it feels like the rest of the world kept turning.
Right.
It stopped for like 2 weeks, and then the funeral happened, and then everyone's lives just went on, and ours stopped forever.
Yeah. And how selfish of them to continue on with their lives while I'm going through this. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so isolating. It feels so alone. And so I think that like telling their stories is a way, like you said, of kind of keeping them alive or keeping like a little bookmark in the world, just for them. So as they learn to hopefully live with that loss, they're just a little bit less alone in the world, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the power of storytelling, right? Again, that's where we met is, on the magic of storytelling is having like, we all have stories to tell. Everyone has a story. And so to be able to tell that, to have that in your hands and to be able to tell that in a way, is such a privilege and such an honor. And to be able to do that with someone who can't tell on their own, is that much more magical. And that much more touching to the people who know that story and don't have the opportunity to tell it on that scale.
Yeah. Well, I think the way that you tell the stories too has really struck me that like you can place yourself alongside the victim and their family, like so that you're like, oh gosh, that must have felt like this, you know? And I think that there's a wonderful thing that's healing about feeling that somebody else feels your pain or like registers it or is like, oh, that's so hard. Right. And I've had, survivors and then also, their families of victims tell me, they'll say, oh, so-and-so did a story on it and they did a good job. And just kind of like the the meaning behind that, or the validation and peace it gives. Like, they did a good job, like, or they spoke at the funeral and they did a good job. And I think we just really don't realize like how much of an impact we can have
absolutely
on other people. And, you know, as we're consuming media, you know, families see your comments. They see that and they see what's put out there. And I think that it's really important to realize that like every single account is a person behind that, and every single story is a family and friends and, you know, whatever. And sometimes it's really hard for the people who are the family of the perpetrators as well.
Yeah.
To see
that's a whole different kind of loss, right?
Yeah. I can't even imagine. So, what am I missing, Liam? What would you hope, like, what tips do you have for people who are true crime, you know, junkies and, you know, where can they find your podcast and your work and all that?
Yeah, well, so you can find me anywhere you find your podcasts. You can find me on social media as well, at Crime Over Wine on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm also personally on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Liam Collins. You can find me on all those platforms too. And then crimeoverwine.com. You can see all of my episodes there, kind of in a Rolodex, bringing the Rolodex back.
Bringing the Rolodex back. It's very like PI, like black and white PI of you. And I'm kind of digging it.
Well, and I'm like very much so a traditionalist that way. Like, I like those kinds of things. I like the feeling of being able to flip through Rolodex.
Do you have like a little leather briefcase?
Right. I wish. No, I wish. I don't have it around me, but I do.
Your wine bag. That's kind of the equivalent.
I carry that. Like I said, I never go anywhere without a bottle of wine.
I love it.
But tips I have, I like you said before, vote with your clicks, right? Like again, like media, we thrive and survive off of our abilities to get people to listen to us, to get people to click on our articles, and so to engage with our content. That's how we survive. That's how we keep the thing going. And so, regardless of what kind of media you're consuming, I would just, consider the media that you're consuming, right? Click on, if you click on the thing and you don't like what they're doing, don't do it again, right? Like if you see the article with the thumbnail of the paparazzi shot and you don't like paparazzi shots, don't click on the article and don't use that news source anymore if you don't like what they're saying or whatever it is. That's how media drives. And it's like, it's so funny because it's like, it's, people, and again, I think we may have briefly mentioned this on this episode, but just how, people are always talking about how there's not enough, positive news in the world. It's always negative.
Yeah.
Which is so true, but it's people who
that's what they're consuming.
That's what they're consuming. And so that's what sells. And that's why it keeps popping up. And that's why the algorithm keeps rewarding that information. And so think about that, right? Like, don't consume the negative news. If you really don't want the negative news, go find positive news. There are a lot. The Good News Network, I love that platform on Instagram.
Okay.
Yes. And so go, I think it's Good News Inc. if I remember correctly, but if not, you can correct me. I'll tell you afterwards. You can correct me. Yeah. But that is such a great way. It's dog videos. It's positive news stories that they repost. We're here for the dog videos. And it's just a really great platform to follow and to get, and to feel good, right? Like, who doesn't want to feel good? Right. And so follow accounts like those. That's what I would say. Listen to podcasts. I listen to Make Your Damn Bed every morning, and that just makes me feel good.
I love that.
And so, and it's a podcast where it's supposed to be like reassuring stuff, and you're supposed to listen to it while you make your bed, kind of thing.
I'm gonna have to check that out now.
It's a great podcast. I love the way it makes me start my day. I don't make my bed, just to be clear, just because anyone who knows me will call me out for being like, you don't make your bed. You're a liar.
That's gonna be in all my show comments of Liam doesn't make his bed.
Listen, I like a different episode. I have strong feelings about making my bed. We can talk about that at a different day, though.
Yeah.
But point being is I consume that content because it makes me feel good every morning. That's a great way to start my day. And so listen to those things, and when it comes to true crime, listen to the ones who are doing it right and the ones that you feel are doing it respectfully. So that way, those maybe can go away and you can reward the ones that are doing it correctly.
I like that a lot. Yeah. And what you share, the content you share, what you add to your story, all those things you can really point. And I think too, as you interact with things, download, listen, like,
Right.
comment, rate.
Right.
It also pushes advertisers to seek
Absolutely.
out. They just want their advertisements to be heard.
Right.
And so we can vote that way too. I really like the Happiness Lab with Lori Santos.
Yeah, I love them
I love
too.
her.
Yes.
And that's kind of my equivalent. Also, I make my bed like 50% of the time.
Okay, respect. That's a
Yeah.
respectable amount. That's a respectable amount.
No. I would say 40%. So 40% of the time I make it, 40% of the time my husband makes it. And then there's like a slice in between that just we're
exists.
animals, and
Yeah.
it just welcomes us comfily when we get back.
Listen,
Yeah.
I have my dogs. I'll give you the Cliff Note version of why I don't like to make my bed. My dogs mess it up anyways. First of all, second of all,
It's their bed. You just live in it.
It's their bed. I just paid for it. I just sleep in it every night, right? And
They let you.
and they just let me. And so for that reason, but also because it's my lived in space, right? That I feel comfortable in.
Right.
I don't feel like it makes much of a difference at the back end.
You literally
whether
do
I
it
make
and
or
then
not.
undo it.
And then
What's
undo
the deal?
it the very next
Yeah, I don't.
See,
whatever.
I knew I liked you, Tiffany. I'm glad I'm
bonded
sharing
on the
this clip to
beds.
all my
Yes.
friends who've ever doubted me about making my bed.
I'll be like, Dr. Bartell says
Right.
you're just going to undo it anyway.
My therapist tells me that it's okay.
Yes, she does. I am the world's therapist.
Correct.
And I endorse this.
Correct. My personal therapist.
Oh, Liam, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for the
been a
wine.
blast. Of course.
Thank you for the crime.
Oh, absolutely.
And thank you for being my friend.
Oh, thank you for being my friend, Tiffany.
This is really fun. Okay, guys, thank you for listening. You can check out Liam's podcast at Crime Over Wine. And if you're listening today and you're resonating with something and you feel a story of your own popping up, make sure you're getting those spaces that you have to tell your story, and be gentle with yourselves. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to How Would You Rate Your Pain? Please subscribe on your favorite listening platform so you never miss an episode. And if this show made you think of someone, please share it with them to help us grow. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Bartell. You can find me on Instagram at the_happy_therapist_. This show is not intended as medical advice and should not take the place of therapy or other mental health services. Please consult with your doctor or mental health provider about your own health. You deserve all the support. How Would You Rate Your Pain is co-produced by WaveLength Studios and Chattanooga Podcast Studios and is part of the Podnuga Network. Graphic design provided by Josh Wilhem at JW Creates and music by Michael Crosa. I'm Dr. Tiffany Bartell. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time right here on How Would You Rate Your Pain?